black man named Caleb Williams finds himself in handcuffs after being wrongfully arrested by 2 police officers. As the truth unfolds, the officers are shocked by Caleb's true identity. What happens when those meant to protect are exposed? If you're new, make sure to subscribe and join us in every new journey. The day started like any other for Caleb Williams at Summit Capital Advisors. Dressed in a crisp suit, he walked confidently through the office, nodding to colleagues and reviewing financial reports. But in an instant, everything changed. 2 officers burst in, their faces set in grim determination. "Caleb Williams, you're under arrest," one barked, roughly grabbing Caleb's arms. Confusion and shock rippled through the office. Caleb, known for his calm demeanor, remained composed as the cuffs clicked shut. His colleagues watched in disbelief as the respected finance manager was led away like a common criminal. As they reached the elevator, Caleb's eyes met the officers. There was something in his gaze, a hint of steel, of hidden depths. It was clear, Caleb Williams was not who these officers thought he was. What led to this grave mistake? Officer Miller's voice cut through the tense silence. "We've received a report of an assault in the area, and you match the description of the person involved." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of racial stereotypes that had clearly influenced the officer's actions. Caleb's disbelief was palpable as he responded, "I just got to the office. I've been busy filing my reports all morning." His words underscored the jarring disconnect between his successful identity and the officer's assumptions. Here was a man, dressed in a tailored suit, surrounded by the trappings of a successful career, being treated like a common criminal. As they made their way through the patrol car, Caleb's colleagues watched in stunned silence. The shock on their faces mirrored Caleb's own inner turmoil. How could this be happening? The very system he had trusted to protect citizens was now threatening his freedom, his reputation, and his sense of security. Outside, word of Caleb's arrest spread quickly through the community. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues struggled to reconcile the image of the kind, hard-working man they knew with the scenario unfolding before them. Phone calls were made, messages exchanged, and a ripple of disbelief turned into a wave of outrage. At the police station, Caleb maintained his composure, even as his mind raced. He knew his rights and wasn't afraid to assert them. "I want to know why I'm being detained," he stated firmly, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "What evidence do you have besides a vague description?" The officers exchanged glances, their certainty beginning to waver in the face of Caleb's articulate questioning. It was clear that this was no ordinary suspect. Officer Jones muttered something about a gut feeling, revealing the flimsy foundation upon which their actions were built. As Caleb was processed, news of his arrest continued to spread. The community's initial shock quickly transformed into a rallying cry for justice. Social media buzzed with disbelief and anger. How could this happen to someone like Caleb? The question echoed through conversations, text messages, and online forums. Caleb's neighbors gathered on their street, sharing their disbelief and discussing ways to help. "This has to be a mistake," one longtime resident insisted. "Caleb's the last person who'd be involved in something like this." Others nodded in agreement, recalling instances of Caleb's kindness and community involvement. At Summit Capital Advisors, Caleb's colleagues were in a state of shock. The finance department came to a standstill as people huddled in small groups, trying to make sense of what had happened. "I was just in a meeting with him an hour ago," one coworker said, shaking her head. "He was talking about the charity fundraiser he's organizing. How could they think he assaulted someone?" The contrast between Caleb's true identity and the officer's assumptions grew more glaring with each passing moment. Here was a man known for his integrity, his professional success, and his commitment to the community. Yet, in the eyes of law enforcement, He had been reduced to nothing more than a stereotype, a dangerous oversimplification based solely on the color of his skin. As the day wore on, the community's response gathered momentum. Caleb's friends began reaching out to local media outlets, determined to shed light on the injustice unfolding. Social justice organizations caught wind of the story, recognizing it as a stark example of the racial profiling that continues to plague society. Caleb Williams's reputation in the community was nothing short of stellar. He was known for his sharp mind and impeccable work ethic. Caleb was also deeply involved in local charities, organizing fundraisers and volunteering his time to help those in need. His neighbors often spoke of his kindness, recounting stories of how he'd mow an elderly resident's lawn or help a family move in down the street. So when news of Caleb's arrest spread through the community, it was met with utter disbelief. The shock rippled through Summit Capital advisors first. Colleagues who had been in meetings with Caleb just hours before his arrest struggled to reconcile the image of their respected coworker with the scenario unfolding before them. "I can't believe this is happening," whispered Sarah, a fellow finance manager. "Caleb was just telling me about the new community center he's helping to fund. How can they think he'd assault someone?" As word spread beyond the office, Caleb's neighbors gathered on their street, their faces etched with concern and confusion. Mrs. Johnson, who lived next door to Caleb for over a decade, shook her head in disbelief. "This has to be a mistake," she insisted. "Caleb's the last person who'd be involved in something like this. Just last week, he was helping my grandson with his college applications." The community's initial shock quickly transformed into a rallying cry for justice. Social media buzzed with disbelief and anger. Friends and acquaintances shared stories of Caleb's kindness and integrity, painting a picture that stood in stark contrast to the accusations against him. As the day progressed, Caleb's friends reached out to local media, determined to expose the injustice. Social justice groups quickly recognized the case as a clear example of ongoing racial profiling. Outside the police station, a small crowd quickly grew, demanding answers. Among them was Mrs. Victoria Carter, who had witnessed Caleb's arrest. Her voice shook as she told a reporter, "He didn't do anything wrong." The crowd's calls for justice marked the start of a community mobilization. Activists and citizens rallied together, holding signs that read, "Justice for Caleb," and "End racial profiling now." As the protests grew, so did the media attention. Local news vans arrived on the scene, their cameras capturing the passionate speeches and determined faces of Caleb's supporters. The story was no longer just about one man's wrongful arrest. It had become a symbol of the larger issues of racial profiling and systemic bias that plagued the community. Inside the police station, the atmosphere was tense. Officers who had initially been confident in their arrest now exchanged uneasy glances. The growing crowd outside and the mounting evidence of Caleb's character and standing in the community were hard to ignore. Yet, they clung to their initial suspicions, unwilling or unable to admit their mistake. As Caleb sat in the holding cell, the weight of his situation hit him. A successful finance manager and community leader, he was now just another statistic in a system riddled with racial bias. The irony was clear. Despite defying stereotypes, he was still trapped by them. The officers grew uneasy, sensing this case was anything but ordinary. Soon, a hidden truth about Caleb would expose a harsh reality faced by many, no matter their achievements. Racial profiling in America isn't just an abstract concept discussed in academic circles or debated on social media. It's a harsh reality that affects real people, like Caleb, every day. The color of his skin had overshadowed his accomplishments, his character, and his humanity in the eyes of law enforcement. This incident served as a stark reminder that even those who have made it aren't immune to the insidious effects of systemic racism. As Caleb waited, his mind raced through the events that led him here. He had been at his desk, reviewing financial reports, when suddenly his world turned upside down. The shock of being handcuffed, the confusion in his colleagues' eyes, the growing crowd outside the police station. It all felt surreal. The emotional toll was immense. Caleb felt anger, frustration, and deep betrayal. He had always believed that hard work and integrity would protect him from injustice, but that belief lay shattered. He worried about how this would affect his family, friends, colleagues, career, and reputation. Outside the station, the crowd continued to grow. Word had spread quickly, and people from all walks of life had gathered to show their support for Caleb. Among them were his neighbors, colleagues, and even some of his clients. They held signs demanding justice, their voices rising in unison against the injustice unfolding before them. Inside, the officers were beginning to feel the pressure. The growing crowd outside, the inconsistencies in the initial report, and Caleb's calm demeanor were all contributing to a sense of unease. Officer Jones, who had been so sure of his gut feeling earlier, now found himself questioning the entire situation. As time passed, Caleb pondered the broader impact of his arrest. How many others had their lives derailed by baseless suspicions tied to skin color? These questions weighed heavily on him, adding to his emotional burden. The incident quickly grew beyond a simple case of mistaken identity. It was becoming a turning point for discussions about racial profiling and systemic bias in law enforcement. Social media buzzed with updates, local news covered the story, and civil rights groups offered their support. Caleb's case highlighted a long-hidden issue in American society, forcing people to face uncomfortable truths about racial stereotypes and the effects of unconscious bias. For many in the community, it was a wake-up call, revealing that progress in racial equality was not as advanced as they thought. As the situation continued to unfold, there was a palpable sense that something had to give. The tension between the growing crowd outside and the increasingly uncertain officers inside couldn't be sustained indefinitely. Something was about to break. But what? And how would it change the course of this story? Caleb Williams sat in the cold, sterile holding cell, his mind racing with a mix of emotions. The successful finance manager, known for his kindness and community involvement, now found himself stripped of his dignity and trapped in a nightmare he never thought possible. As he stared at the blank walls, the reality of his situation began to sink in. Despite the overwhelming situation, Caleb maintained his composure. He knew that displaying anger or fear could only make things worse. Instead, he focused on asserting his innocence and identity. "I need to speak with my lawyer," he calmly stated to the officer outside his cell. "This is a mistake, and I have the right to legal representation." Officer Miller, who had been observing Caleb, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. The man before him didn't fit the profile of a typical suspect. His calm demeanor and articulate speech contrasted sharply with the chaotic environment of the police station. Outside the station, the crowd continued to grow. Word had spread quickly, and people from all walks of life had gathered to show their support for Caleb. The chants of "Justice for Caleb" and "End racial profiling" echoed through the halls of the police station, reaching Caleb's ears and providing a glimmer of hope. Inside, Officer Stevens approached Caleb's cell, a look of uncertainty on his face. "Mr. Williams," he began, his voice hesitant, "we're looking into your claims. Can you tell us more about your work and your whereabouts this morning?" Caleb seized the opportunity to assert his identity once more. "I'm a finance manager at Summit Capital Advisors," he stated firmly. "I arrived at work at 8:30 this morning and was in meetings until your officers burst into my office. You can verify this with my colleagues and check the security footage." As Caleb spoke, Officer Stevens's expression changed. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. and he exchanged a glance with Officer Miller. Something about Caleb's demeanor and the details he provided didn't align with their initial assumptions. Tension filled the air as Officer Stevens stepped away to make a call. Caleb sensed a shift, but kept his hopes in check, knowing that in a biased system, even clear facts could be twisted or overlooked. As time passed, Caleb reflected on the broader implications of his arrest. How many others had faced similar injustices? How many careers and lives had been ruined due to unfounded suspicions based on skin color? These questions weighed heavily on him, deepening his emotional burden. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside Caleb's cell. Officer Stevens returned, this time accompanied by the police captain. Their expressions were a mix of concern and disbelief. "Mr. Williams?" the captain began, his voice strained. "We've received some information about your background. It seems there's been a grave misunderstanding." Outside the police station, a crowd had formed, growing from a few concerned citizens to a sizable group demanding answers. Among them was Mrs. Victoria Carter, who witnessed Caleb's arrest. Her voice trembled as she told a reporter, "I saw them handcuff him in his office. He didn't resist at all. It made no sense." As the protests grew, so did media attention. Local news vans arrived, capturing the passionate speeches and determined faces of Caleb's supporters. The story shifted from one wrongful arrest to a symbol of racial profiling and systemic bias. Protesters chanted for justice, their voices echoing off the police station walls. Local activists and community leaders demanded accountability for Caleb. The crowd's energy was palpable, filled with anger, frustration, and unwavering support for an innocent man. Inside the station, tension filled the air. Officers who once felt confident in their arrest exchanged uneasy glances. The growing crowd outside and evidence of Caleb's character were hard to ignore, yet they clung to their initial suspicions, unwilling to admit their mistake. Lieutenant Maria Garcia observed the growing crowd from a window, her brow furrowed with concern. She had been with the force for over a decade and had seen her fair share of protests, but this felt different. The community's response was swift and unified, a clear indication that this case had touched a nerve. "We need to address this," Garcia said to her colleagues. "The longer we wait, the worse it's going to get." She turned to Officer Jones, who had been part of the arrest team. "Are you absolutely certain about the identification?" Jones shifted uncomfortably. "We had a description and a gut feeling," he mumbled, the weakness of his justification becoming painfully apparent. Garcia's eyes narrowed. "A gut feeling isn't enough. We need facts, and we need them now." The police department's public relations team scrambled to prepare a statement, aware that the situation was rapidly spiraling beyond their control. They needed to address the community's concerns, but how could they do so without admitting to a potentially massive error in judgment? Outside, the crowd's energy showed no signs of waning. If anything, it grew stronger as more people joined the protest. The chants grew louder, the signs more numerous. "We won't be silent! Justice for Caleb." The message was clear. This community would not stand idly by while one of their own was wrongfully accused. As night began to fall, the glow of candles joined the light of street lamps and camera flashes. A vigil had begun, a powerful symbol of the community's unwavering support for Caleb. Songs of hope and resistance filled the air, a stark contrast to the tense silence within the police station. The media coverage had expanded beyond local news. National outlets had picked up the story, framing it within the larger context of racial profiling and police misconduct. Social media was ablaze with hashtags demanding justice for Caleb, spreading awareness far beyond the boundaries of the local community. As the protests outside grew louder, A different kind of tension was building inside the station. Lieutenant Maria Garcia, known for her keen instincts, couldn't shake the feeling that something about this arrest just didn't add up. She stood by the window, watching the growing crowd, her brow furrowed in concentration. The station fell silent as Officer Stevens approached Lieutenant Garcia, his face pale with realization. "Lieutenant," he whispered, "I think you need to know about it." Garcia's eyes widened, sensing the gravity of the situation. She nodded, gesturing for Stevens to continue. "I've been doing some digging," Stevens said, his voice barely audible. "Caleb Williams. He's not just a finance manager. He's an undercover human rights investigator." Garcia's suspicions were confirmed, but the reality hit her like a ton of bricks. She took a deep breath, steadying herself against the desk. "Are you absolutely certain?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Stevens nodded, handing her a file. "It's all here. He's been working on cases of police misconduct for years, and we just arrested him." The implications of this revelation were staggering. Garcia's mind raced, trying to process what this meant for the department, for the officers involved, and for the community that was still protesting outside. "Get Miller and Jones in here now," Garcia ordered, her voice teat with tension. As Stevens hurried off, she flipped through the file, her heart sinking with each page. Caleb Williams wasn't just any investigator. He was one of the best in the field, known for his meticulous work and unwavering commitment to justice. Miller and Jones entered the room, their faces a mix of confusion and apprehension. Garcia looked up from the file, her expression grim. "Gentlemen, we have a situation," she began, her words measured. "The man you arrested today, Caleb Williams, is an undercover human rights investigator." The color drained from Miller's face. Jones stumbled back, leaning against the wall for support. That's impossible," Miller stuttered. "We checked his background. He's a finance manager." "A very convincing cover," Garcia replied, her tone sharp. "One that you two didn't bother to look beyond because of your, what did you call it, a gut feeling?" The shame on their faces was palpable. Jones opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The gravity of their mistake was sinking in, and with it, the potential consequences. Garcia continued, her voice filled with controlled anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just a case of mistaken identity. You've arrested a man who's dedicated his life to exposing police misconduct, and you did it based on nothing more than racial profiling." The silence in the room was deafening. Miller and Jones exchanged glances, the reality of their actions hitting them full force. They had let their biases guide them, and in doing so, they had potentially compromised years of undercover work and put the entire department at risk. "Lieutenant," Miller finally spoke, his voice shaking. What do we do now?" Garcia's response was immediate and firm. "We fix this. Now." She turned to Stevens. "Get Williams out of that cell immediately, and for God's sake, make sure he's treated with respect." As Stevens hurried off, Garcia faced Miller and Jones again. "You two have put us all at risk. This could lead to a federal investigation, not to mention the damage to our relationship with the community." Outside, the protests continued, unaware of the bombshell that had just dropped inside the station. Garcia could hear the chants for justice, and the irony wasn't lost on her. The very man they were demanding freedom for was someone who had been fighting for their cause all along. "We need to address this publicly," Garcia said, more to herself than to the officers in front of her. "But first, we need to talk to Williams. We need to understand the full scope of his work and the potential fallout from this arrest." As if on cue, Stevens returned, looking slightly bewildered. "Lieutenant, Mr. Williams is asking to speak with you. He says it's urgent." Garcia nodded, steeling herself for what was sure to be a difficult conversation. As she walked towards the holding area, her mind raced with questions. How would Williams react? Would he be willing to work with them to mitigate the damage? Or would this incident become the catalyst for a much larger investigation into the department? This revelation went beyond the police station, highlighting deep issues in law enforcement that Caleb Williams had been fighting to expose. The irony of his arrest was clear to Garcia. In trying to catch a criminal, they had accidentally confirmed Williams' point. As Lieutenant Garcia approached Caleb's holding cell, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on her. The man they had arrested wasn't just any suspect. He was an undercover human rights investigator, and the implications of this revelation were staggering. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. Caleb looked up as Garcia entered, his expression calm but guarded. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice steady, "I think it's time we had a talk." Garcia nodded, pulling up a chair. "Mr. Williams, I owe you an apology. We've just learned about your true identity and the nature of your work." A flicker of surprise crossed Caleb's face, quickly replaced by a look of determination. "Then you understand the seriousness of what's happened here," he said, leaning forward. "I've been gathering evidence on officers who've been abusing their power," Caleb explained, his voice low. "Racial profiling, excessive force, falsified reports, it's all there. And my arrest today? It's just another piece of the puzzle." The irony was clear to Garcia. By arresting Caleb, they had given him first-hand experience of the issues he was investigating, highlighting how deep these problems were in the system. As Caleb shared his findings, Garcia felt both admiration for his dedication and concern for the misconduct he uncovered. He had risked a lot to expose the truth, and now that risk had come back in an unexpected way. "Do you realize what you've done?" Caleb asked, his eyes meeting Garcia's. "This arrest could have compromised months of work, but it's also given me an insider's perspective that I couldn't have gotten any other way." Garcia nodded, realizing the weight of his words. The department's mistake had given Caleb a key piece of evidence, marking a turning point for potential changes within the force. As the conversation continued, Garcia's mind raced with questions. How many officers were involved in Caleb's investigation? How high did the misconduct go? And what would happen to those responsible for his wrongful arrest? The implications stretched beyond the police station. Caleb's work could lead to major reforms, not just in their department, but possibly nationwide. It was a sobering thought that filled Garcia with both hope and concern. "What happens now?" Garcia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "That depends on you, Lieutenant. Are you ready to be part of the solution?" As Garcia contemplated her response, she knew that the next few hours would be crucial. The decisions made here, in this small holding cell, could set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the entire department. Outside, the protests continued, unaware of the momentous conversation taking place inside. The chance for justice took on a new meaning now, echoing the very cause Caleb had been fighting for all along. The chance for justice outside would soon be overshadowed by the tension inside the station. As Caleb stepped out of his cell, the balance of power shifted. The officers who had arrested him now felt uneasy. Lieutenant Garcia led the way, her professional demeanor masking her inner turmoil. Caleb walked beside her, his posture straight and eyes forward, a stark contrast to his earlier entry as a suspect. As they passed through the booking area, heads turned. Officers who had ignored Caleb during his arrest now stared, confusion and realization on their faces. Whispers spread through the station like wildfire. "Is that really him? I heard he's some big-shot investigator. We're in deep trouble now." Officer Miller and Jones stood aside, their faces pale and tense. The weight of their mistake showed in every line of their bodies. As Caleb passed, he paused to meet their gaze. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. Things were about to change. In the main office, Chief Frank Whalen was waiting. His usual commanding presence seemed diminished as he faced Caleb and Lieutenant Garcia. "Mr. Williams," he began, his voice strained. "I want to express our deepest apologies for this misunderstanding." Caleb's response was measured but firm. "Chief Whalen, I think we both know this was more than a misunderstanding. It's a symptom of a much larger problem." The chief nodded, sweat beading on his forehead. "Of course, we're prepared to fully cooperate with your investigation. Whatever you need." "What I need," Caleb interrupted, "is for you to understand the gravity of this situation. Your officers didn't just arrest the wrong man. They exposed a systemic issue that goes far beyond this single incident." As Caleb spoke, the tension in the room grew. Officers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. The power dynamics had flipped. The man they once saw as a criminal now held their careers and the future of the department in his hands. Lieutenant Garcia stepped forward. "Mr. Williams is right. This incident has brought to light issues that we can no longer ignore. We need to take immediate action." Chief Whalen nodded, his face a mix of resignation and determination. "Agreed. Mr. Williams, I'd like to set up a meeting with you and our Internal Affairs Department as soon as possible. We need to get to the bottom of this." As the chief spoke, Caleb could see the panic spreading through the room. Officers who had been uninvolved in his arrest now worried about their own past actions. The realization that an undercover investigator had been in their midst for months was sending shockwaves through the entire force. "I'll need access to all your records," Caleb said, his voice firm. "Arrest reports, complaint files, body cam footage, everything." The chief hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Of course. We'll make sure you have everything you need." As the meeting ended, Caleb faced the room of officers, noting their nervous expressions. "I want you all to understand something," he said, his voice firm. "This isn't about punishment. It's about reform and ensuring that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. In that moment, it was clear they were at a turning point. The old ways were over. A new era of accountability and transparency was beginning. As news of Caleb's true identity spread, a media frenzy erupted. What hidden truths would emerge as the nation focused on this small town's big issue? The community that had rallied behind Caleb, the wrongfully arrested finance manager, was about to face a shocking revelation. He was an undercover human rights investigator. The protests intensified. Local activists were caught off guard. Mara Evans, a prominent organizer, told the crowd, "We knew Caleb was innocent, but we had no idea he was exposing the injustices that led to his arrest. This changes everything." The revelation sparked urgent calls for systemic reform. Chants of justice for Caleb shifted to demands for accountability and an end to racial profiling. As the story gained traction, national media flooded the town. News vans lined the streets, and reporters sought interviews with anyone connected to the case. The police department faced intense scrutiny. Lieutenant Maria Garcia, aware of the public relations risk, emphasized the need for transparency. "This incident reflects a broader issue within our department and law enforcement," she stated. We are committed to working with Mr. Williams and federal oversight to uphold the highest standards of accountability. Social media exploded with discussions about Caleb's case. Hashtags trended nationally, drawing attention from civil rights organizations and politicians alike. The incident had become a flashpoint in the ongoing national conversation about police reform and racial justice. Community leaders seized the moment to advocate for real change. Reverend Marcus Jackson addressed a crowd outside City Hall saying, "This isn't just about one man or incident. It's our chance to demand lasting change in how our community is policed." The intensity of the public response caught local officials off guard. Mayor Ruby Astor held an emergency meeting with her staff to address community concerns while supporting the police. "We need to strike a balance," she told her advisors. "We can't ignore these valid concerns, but we also can't abandon our police force." As days went by, the story remained in the spotlight. National civil rights leaders arrived, adding pressure for reform. Caleb Williams, now in the national eye, used his platform to highlight systemic issues. In a televised interview, he said, "What happened to me isn't unique. It's a symptom of a larger problem affecting communities of color nationwide." The police department struggled to maintain order while facing demands for accountability. Chief Frank Whalen announced a review of policies, emphasizing that most officers serve the community with honor and integrity. As the story unfolded, it became clear that Caleb's arrest had broader implications. Civil rights attorneys from across the country began offering their services, recognizing the potential for a landmark case on police accountability. The community's demand for answers grew into a nationwide call for action. What began as a local incident of racial profiling transformed into a catalyst for a larger movement. The focus shifted from just seeking justice for Caleb to how this moment could drive lasting change in police departments nationwide. Attention shifted to the police department's response. A key question loomed: could a system with deep-rooted practices truly change? Chief Frank Whalen stood before a sea of microphones and cameras, his usual commanding presence diminished by the weight of the moment. "Let me begin by addressing the events that occurred earlier today," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "The arrest of Mr. Caleb Williams was a mistake, one that should never have taken place." The chief's words hung in the air, heavy with the implications of what had transpired. He continued, acknowledging the deeper issues at play. "We recognize that this incident is part of a larger, long-standing problem that has persisted within our department for far too long." As Whalen spoke, the expressions of the officers behind him varied. Some looked uneasy, others resigned, and a few genuinely remorseful. The department's internal struggles were now on public display. Lieutenant Maria Garcia stood nearby, aware that while the chief's statements were necessary, the real challenges lay ahead in closed-door discussions and tough decisions. Inside the station, those conversations had already begun. Officer Miller sat in a small conference room, his head in his hands. "I messed up," he said to his partner, Jones. "We messed up. How did we let this happen?" Jones shook his head, regret etched on his face. "We let our assumptions cloud our judgment. Now we've jeopardized the entire department." Their conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Garcia. "Officer Miller, Officer Jones," she said, her tone professional but stern. "I need you both in my office. Now." As they walked through the station, they felt their colleagues' eyes on them. Whispers of sympathy and judgment swirled, signaling the fallout from their actions had just begun. In her office, Garcia didn't mince words. "You two are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation," she said. "I don't need to tell you how serious this is. Your actions have not only jeopardized Mr. Williams's rights, but have also cast a shadow over our entire department." Miller opened his mouth to protest, but Garcia held up a hand. "This isn't just about you. We're looking at every officer, every policy, every procedure. No stone will be left unturned. As news of the suspension spread, unease settled over the department. Officers who had relied on their gut feelings began questioning their past actions, haunted by Caleb Williams' wrongful arrest and its consequences. Chief Whalen faced a tough balance. He needed to show the public that the department was acting decisively while also dealing with pressure from the police union and veteran officers who thought the response was excessive. "We can't throw our own under the bus," argued Captain Thompson, a 30-year veteran of the force. "These officers made a mistake, yes, but they were just doing their job." Whalen's response was firm. "Their job is to protect and serve all members of our community, not to act on unfounded suspicions based on race. We have to do better, and that starts with holding ourselves accountable." As the day progressed, pressure mounted. Community leaders demanded an overhaul of the department's training and policies, while civil rights groups offered to help implement new anti-bias measures. The key question remained: would these efforts lead to real, lasting change? As the police department dealt with its problems, all eyes were on Caleb Williams. His experience had caused a stir, but how would he handle this attention? The answer came quickly when Caleb took the podium outside the courthouse, facing a crowd of cameras and reporters. Caleb took a deep breath, his calmness contrasting with the crowd's excitement. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady. "I'm here not just as Caleb Williams, the man wrongfully arrested, but as a voice for many others who have faced similar injustices." The crowd fell silent, listening intently. Caleb looked around at the faces and said, "What happened to me isn't unique. It's part of a larger problem affecting communities of color across our nation. My work as an undercover investigator helped me see these issues, but my own experience really showed me how deep the problem goes." As Caleb spoke, his words resonated far beyond the crowd. Live streams and social media spread his message widely. He highlighted the systemic issues he found during his investigation, showing a law enforcement culture in urgent need of reform. "This isn't about punishing individual officers," Caleb explained, his tone measured. "It's about changing a system that allows bias and prejudice to influence decisions that can alter lives forever. We need comprehensive reform, from training and recruitment to accountability measures and community engagement." Caleb's statement was more than just criticism. He suggested real improvements based on his experience as an investigator and a victim. "We need deeper bias training, strong accountability systems, and genuine connections between police and the communities they serve." As Caleb spoke, the crowd's mood shifted from anger to determination and hope. His words redirected their energy towards constructive action instead of just outrage. Local activist Mara Evans nodded along, saying, "Caleb's words give us a roadmap. He's not just highlighting problems, he's offering solutions." Caleb's statement resonated beyond the community. National civil rights groups used it as a rallying cry, and politicians at all levels had to address the growing demand for change. As Caleb concluded his statement, he addressed the officers directly. "To all law enforcement officers dedicated to protecting and serving with integrity, we need you. Your voices, experiences, and commitment to justice are essential. Join us in being part of the solution. Speak out against injustice, even if it comes from within your own ranks." The impact of Caleb's words on the police department was palpable. Officer Miller, watching the broadcast from his living room, felt a mix of shame and determination. "He's right," Miller muttered to himself. "We can't stay silent anymore." As Caleb left the podium, the crowd cheered. But the real work was just starting. Inspired by his words, community leaders began to plan a new initiative to encourage dialogue and implement the changes he proposed. The crowd's applause faded, but the energy lingered. Community leaders gathered to discuss next steps, wondering if this momentum could lead to lasting change. After Caleb's speech, the community buzzed with renewed purpose. Local activists, inspired by him, saw a chance for action. Mara Evans emerged as a key leader behind the new Justice Initiative. "We can't let this moment slip away," Mara told a group of fellow activists gathered in a local community center. "Caleb's experience has opened people's eyes. Now it's up to us to turn that awareness into real change." The Justice Initiative formed quickly, gaining support from various community members. Its clear goals included addressing systemic issues in law enforcement, promoting transparency, and improving relationships between police and the community. The initiative focused on several key areas. First, a legal aid clinic was set up to help those who felt unfairly targeted by police. "Everyone should know their rights and have access to legal support," said Ryan Evans, a local attorney. Another important part was a community oversight board to review police conduct and investigate complaints. "We need checks and balances," said Arnold Derry, a retired judge leading the board. "The community must have a real voice in policing." The initiative emphasized education and training, planning workshops for both police and community members on topics like implicit bias and de-escalation. As news spread, support grew from unexpected places. Local business owners offered financial backing, hoping for a more harmonious community, while some police officers showed interest in joining the initiative's programs. As initial excitement faded, challenges for the Justice Initiative became clearer. Some veteran officers resisted civilian oversight, while community members feared it could compromise public safety. Funding was also a concern. While support had been strong, sustaining the initiative's programs needed ongoing financial commitment. Grant applications were written and fundraising events planned, but the long-term viability remained uncertain. The biggest challenge was maintaining momentum. As weeks passed and media attention faded, there was worry that community enthusiasm might dwindle. "We can't let this be just a moment," Mara Evans stressed in a meeting. "We need to keep people engaged and show that real change takes time and effort." Despite the obstacles, the Justice Initiative moved ahead. Community meetings drew diverse crowds eager to share ideas. The legal aid clinic opened, helping those who felt powerless in the justice system. As the initiative gained momentum, neighboring communities began seeking guidance, suggesting the movement could extend beyond their town. As neighboring towns sought guidance, Caleb Williams reflected on his role in the growing movement. His experience offered valuable insights. But was he ready to be a leader? This decision could spark a national conversation on police reform and racial justice. Sitting in his living room with piles of papers around him, Caleb felt the pressure of expectation. In just a few weeks, he had gone from finance manager to a key figure in a social justice movement, and it weighed heavily on him. His phone buzzed with another message from Mara Evans, the local activist who had been instrumental in organizing the Justice Initiative. "We need you, Caleb," it read. "Your story is powerful. It can change minds." Caleb sighed as he picked up a framed photo of his college graduation, remembering his parents' warnings about the challenges he might face as a black man in America. He had dismissed their concerns back then, confident in his hard work. Now, he understood the truth in their words. He set the photo down and faced his laptop, filled with emails from reporters and community organizers. He had a choice: return to his life as a finance manager or become an advocate for change. His mind drifted to his arrest, the helplessness he felt being handcuffed for nothing more than his skin color. He thought of others who faced similar injustices without support, and the memory strengthened his resolve. With a deep breath, Caleb began to type out a response to Mara. "I'm in," he wrote. "Let's take this fight to the next level." In the following days, Caleb dedicated himself to his new mission, with the same focus he had in finance. He studied legal texts, researched advocacy campaigns, and consulted experts in criminal justice reform, applying his analytical skills to this challenge. At his first public appearance as an advocate, a crowd gathered outside the community center. As he stepped onto the stage, nerves and determination filled him. "My story is just one of many," he said, his voice steady. "But it must be told repeatedly until we see real change." Caleb laid out his vision for reform, highlighting the need for better training, accountability, and community oversight of police. He stressed that change requires collaboration. "We can't drive wedges. We need everyone at the table: community members, law enforcement, and policymakers." His finance background added credibility, while his personal story resonated with those who had faced injustice. Invitations to speak at town halls and police academies poured in. Despite his growing profile, Caleb stayed connected to the community, regularly meeting with residents to hear their concerns. These conversations informed his advocacy. Caleb faced challenges, including pushback from law enforcement and the emotional toll of recounting his trauma. Yet, he drew strength from a supportive network of advocates. One of his key initiatives was a series of workshops that fostered honest discussions about race and bias between community members and police. These sessions, though tense, often led to breakthroughs in understanding. Caleb's workshops were making a local impact, but a bigger story was brewing. His initiative was set to inspire nationwide change. As news of the Justice Initiative spread, communities across the country saw it as a model for tackling racial bias and police misconduct. In nearby towns, activists reached out for guidance to start similar initiatives. Caleb and his team eagerly shared resources, leading to a network of programs throughout the state. The success of the Justice Initiative caught the attention of civil rights organizations nationwide. In Chicago, community organizers launched town hall meetings, modeled after Caleb's workshops, encouraging tough conversations about race and policing. In Atlanta, local businesses and civil rights groups started their own legal aid clinic for those unfairly targeted by law enforcement. The clinic quickly received overwhelming requests, underscoring the community's needs. The growing movement didn't go unnoticed by policymakers. State legislators in several states began introducing bills inspired by the Justice Initiative's recommendations. These proposed laws covered a range of issues, from mandating implicit bias training for police officers to strengthening civilian oversight boards. At the federal level, progressive lawmakers noticed the grassroots movement for police reform. They viewed these local initiatives as a strong case for national legislation. Caleb was invited to testify before Congress, sharing his story and the lessons from the Justice Initiative. Media coverage amplified the movement's message, with national outlets highlighting community initiatives as solutions to police community issues. Caleb and other leaders became sought-after voices for interviews and discussions. However, the movement faced challenges. Some law enforcement unions pushed back, viewing the initiatives as unfair criticism. Conservative politicians dismissed them as anti-police rhetoric, reflecting the polarized nature of the debate. Despite these hurdles, momentum grew. More communities embraced the idea that meaningful change could start locally, seeing Caleb's story and the Justice Initiative as a practical approach to long-standing issues. The movement gained unexpected allies, including some police chiefs who recognized the need for change and supported community initiatives. Their backing helped connect reform advocates with skeptical law enforcement members. As more communities adopted similar programs, a national network formed. Regular conference calls and online forums enabled local leaders to share best practices, discuss challenges, and coordinate efforts, strengthening the movement's message and influence. 1 year after Caleb's arrest, his hometown faced a crossroads. While substantial reforms had been made, a lingering question remained. had they truly tackled the root issues. The Justice Initiative had sparked a nationwide movement, but its birthplace faced unique challenges in navigating change. Chief Frank Whalen addressed the City Council, saying, "We've had a 30% drop in complaints against officers this year. Our new training and community programs are working." Officer Miller, back on patrol after retraining, focused on building trust with the community. "It's not easy," he told his partner. "Some still look at us with suspicion. We have to earn their trust daily." The legal aid clinic helped over 200 people in its first year. Attorney Marcus Thompson noted, "We're giving people a voice. Many didn't think they could challenge unfair treatment." Activist Mara Evans emphasized the progress made but warned, "We can't be complacent. There's still work to do." Many in the community shared her view that lasting change needs continued effort. The Community Oversight Board, led by retired Judge Arnold Derry, reviewed many cases in its first year, leading to policy changes in the police department, like new traffic stop guidelines and body camera use. Derry noted, "Officers are more aware of their actions and their consequences." However, some veteran officers retired early due to the increased scrutiny, creating a shortage of experienced staff. Chief Whalen had to balance the need for reform with keeping the department fully staffed. Community reactions were mixed. Many residents appreciated the improved police behavior. Local business owner Maria Rodriguez said, "I feel more comfortable calling the police now." But others worried that too much change might hurt law enforcement's ability to fight crime. Caleb Williams, whose arrest sparked the movement, remained key to the community's change. His workshops helped foster open dialogue between officers and residents. "It's about understanding each other's perspectives," Caleb said. The Justice Initiative also influenced local schools, which added lessons on civil rights and community engagement. Youth programs partnered with police for mentoring, aiming to build understanding from an early age. As the one-year mark approached, the community prepared for a town hall meeting to review progress and address ongoing concerns. It would showcase the town's changes and challenges, celebration or debate. While national attention had faded, Caleb's hometown became a model for police reform, attracting researchers to study the initiative's long-term effects. As the town celebrated its reputation for reform, challenges emerged. Chief Frank Whalen addressed a packed town hall, noting progress but warning against complacency. "We've come a long way, but our work is far from over," he said. The Justice Initiative aimed for lasting change. Mara Evans, a key activist, emphasized their goal to reshape the relationship between law enforcement and the community, not just make surface-level reforms. This shift was visible in Officer Miller's new interactions with residents. "It's not always easy," he said at a neighborhood watch meeting. "There's still mistrust, but we're talking, and that's a start." The Community Oversight Board, led by Judge Arnold Derry, faced challenges in balancing officer accountability with effective policing. "It's a constant negotiation," she noted. As the initiative's programs developed, new questions arose about long-term funding, community engagement, and measuring success beyond statistics. Caleb Williams, who led workshops between officers and residents, felt the pressure. "The real test," he said, "is what happens on the streets during tense moments." The initiative inspired similar efforts nationwide, bringing added pressure. Although national media attention had faded, researchers and policymakers were still closely monitoring for signs of lasting change. The police department faced unexpected challenges as veteran officers retired, leaving new recruits who, while open to reform, lacked experience. Chief Whalen struggled to balance the need for change with effective policing. The community had mixed feelings. Many residents praised improved police interactions, with business owner Maria Rodriguez noting, "Officers seem part of the community now." However, others, like Tom Baker, worried about rising crime rates and felt reform could compromise safety, sparking heated debates. New partnerships formed as local schools included civil rights lessons and youth programs, teamed up with police for mentoring. These efforts aimed to foster understanding from an early age. The future held both promise and uncertainty. Would these initiatives create lasting change or face challenges? The town, once in the headlines for negative reasons, was now central to a national conversation about justice and community. Caleb Williams's story serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing struggle for justice and equality. His experience transformed a small town and sparked a nationwide movement, demonstrating the impact one individual can have when backed by a determined community. The Justice Initiative's success highlights the importance of open dialogue, accountability, and cooperation between law enforcement and citizens. It shows that meaningful change is possible when people come together to address systemic issues. While progress has been made, the road ahead remains challenging. Sustaining reforms, addressing new obstacles, and maintaining community engagement are ongoing tasks. As Caleb often says, change takes time and effort, and it requires all of us to work together. This journey towards a more just society is far from over. It requires vigilance, perseverance, and active participation from every member of the community. The power to create lasting change lies in our collective hands.